What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Structured Archery Reviews. In this episode, it's going to be quite different because we're finally introducing arrows into our review series. We're going to apply the same unbiased and data-driven reviewing methods from our bow reviews to these arrow reviews. So as you probably already know by the title of this video is taking a look at the cheapest arrows I could find and comparing them to high-end arrows. So we're going to be taking some store brand arrows from Bass Pro, Cabelas, Sportsman's Warehouse, and Scheels and comparing them to high-dollar arrows like the Easton FMJs and the Victory V1s. This video idea was a result of a 3-part series that I'm coming out with soon, covering arrow selection, building, and tuning. I was working on this video series and an idea popped into my head. I wanted to know how cheap of an arrow is acceptable. Are we all spending too much on arrows? So to answer these questions, I went to these big box stores and picked up every arrow with their name on it. I tested all of them with a professional spine and straightness tester and compared them to high-dollar counterparts to see how bad or surprisingly good they were. But before I jump into the rankings and how these arrows did, let's get educated on what's important and what I'm measuring. First of all, arrow quality is all about consistency. Without it, you'll never be able to get good groups and you won't be able to distinguish between bad shots and bad arrows. So in the end, there are 3 major areas of concern. There is spine, straightness, and consistency. To address these factors, we'll be measuring each of the 6 arrows per box with 12 separate measurements, so 72 measurements in total. In the end, I'll combine 42 of those measurements to create a strong shot score for that arrow choice. This is to summarize its performance. So we're going to be looking at 4 different stores: Cabelas, Bass Pro, Sportsman's Warehouse, and Scheels. First off, we'll start with Cabelas, which have their own branded arrows. Obviously, they don't manufacture them. They just buy them from a manufacturer and throw their labels on. In Cabelas' case, the arrows are manufactured by Easton. So let's take a look at the 2 arrows that Cabelas offers, the Stalker Xtreme and the Carbon Hunter. The Carbon Hunter comes in at $40.99 and the Stalker Xtremes come in at $45.99. So there's a $5 difference between the arrows. Bass Pro owns the BlackOut brand arrows, and as you may know, they recently bought Cabelas, but I think that this has been their in-house brand since before they merged. Instead of putting their Bass Pro logo on these arrows, they created a brand name and made up some pretty nice packaging. At first look, you would never think that these were actually sold by Bass Pro. The actual manufacturer of these arrows is Gold Tip, hence the use of gold tip nocks. So Bass Pro bought these arrows and threw some different stickers on them. We're going to be looking at the 2 arrows that BlackOut offers, the X3 Hunter at $44.99 and the X5 Hunter at $34.99. Next, let's talk about Sportsman's Warehouse, which has one branded arrow called the Vital Impact. It comes in a pretty cheap looking box, and I'm not sure who manufactures the arrows, but they come in at $36.99. Next, we have Scheels, which is another large chain store, but you might not be familiar with them if you live towards the coasts. They have a total of 27 locations, primarily in the Midwest. It's a lot like a cross between Bass Pro and a traditional sporting goods store. If you want to check out if one is near you, they have a store map available online, but let's talk about their arrows. They have 2 Scheels branded options, the Vendetta and the Vendetta Pros, which are co-branded with Victory Archery, who manufactures them. The Vendetta comes in at a price of $34.99 and the Pros come in $10 more at $44.99. Lastly, let's get into the 2 more expensive arrows that will be the benchmarks in this comparison. The Easton FMJ. Everybody knows about it, and I consider it a gold standard in the bow hunting community. It's a carbon aluminum shaft, plus it's extremely popular, so this will definitely be a part of the benchmarks. Finally, there's the Victory VAP V1s, which is my personal hunting arrow choice. I used to shoot Victory in competition, and they have some features that are important to me. I was able to get my hands on the Victory RIP V1s, which are very similar to the VAPs, so I knew I had to throw these in for reference and as a higher price benchmark. Alright, the time has come. Let's take a look at the results. We'll go through the benchmarks first so we can get a sense of what you're getting out of a high quality arrow. I really consider the Easton FMJ to be a standard within the hunting community. Easton is the only company at this point that creates arrows that use both carbon fiber and aluminum. Easton's premier target arrows are the X10s, which have similar construction except the aluminum is on the inside and the carbon fiber is tapered for better aerodynamics. With this carbon aluminum construction, the carbon fiber gives the arrow resiliency, and the aluminum sleeve that's bonded over the carbon fiber shaft gives the arrow straightness. Having aluminum on the outside also provides a layer of protection, hence the name Full Metal Jacket. Before I show you the numbers and ratings on these arrows, let me first explain my methodology. I've taken the measurements from all of the arrows in a pack and combined them into a single score for that arrow choice. This score takes into account multiple different measures of spine, straightness, and consistency, and boils it down to one overall rating. I've also taken those separate domains of spine, straightness, and consistency and summarized those into star ratings. This scoring method is to show you the summarized quality of these arrows as well as where these arrows are strong and weak. I did this because nobody's going to want to weed through all of these numbers. Alright, let's finally take a look at the FMJ's results. Starting with spine, the FMJ receives 4 1/4 stars. For straightness, it gets 4 3/4 stars, and for consistency, the FMJ gets 4 stars. With all 42 measures weighted by importance and combined, the Easton Full Metal Jacket received a Strongshot Archery quality rating of 83. Let's move on to the Victory Rip Elite 204. This is an all-carbon arrow, unlike the FMJs, and you might have heard the Elite designation that I gave the Rips. This means that they are the best quality with only 1,000th run out according to Victory. This is some extremely high tolerances. So let's take a look at the results. The Rip performed extremely well on my test. In the spine category, the Victory Rip took all 5 stars. In the straightness, it won another 5 stars. In the consistency category, the Rip walks away with 4 3/4 stars. Overall, the Victory Archery Rip Elite 204 walks away with a quality rating of 95, which is really crazy to see. I have to admit, I was quite surprised by these results. I, like a lot of other people, consider the FMJ to be a gold standard when it comes to general purpose hunting arrows. I think this just goes to show what happens when you rely on measurements and data. What's thought as common knowledge gets challenged. Looking over the Rip's numbers, you can tell that Victory is excelling in both their manufacturing process and in their quality control. The construction of the arrow was extremely consistent, and the variance from arrow to arrow was minimal. They really did an outstanding job, but this is probably a good time to talk about the limitations of what I'm doing here. While the tools that I'm using are top quality and I've made sure that the processes that I'm using are very consistent, the only issue here is sample size. At this point, I'm testing one box of arrows that I'm buying off the shelf, just like you would. So I can't say that the box I get is a fair reflection of all of the arrows made by any manufacturer. I might have lucked into a good box, or I might have grabbed a bad box. There's really no way for me to tell. But what I can say is, since this is the same way that you'd probably buy arrows, you're probably just as likely to grab a box similar to what I grabbed. So this isn't scientific perfection, but I am being fair. Hopefully in the future, I can retest some of these arrows and increase my sample size. So you should consider this a starting point with more to come. Now that we have all the benchmarks in place, let's talk about the store branded arrows. Remember, these stores aren't making these arrows. They're buying them from someone and putting their label on them. What we don't know is if these arrows get the same quality control as we'd expect from a larger name brand. So let's take a look at the data and see what we're getting for our money. We'll start with Cabelas. There are 2 entrants from Cabelas, the Carbon Hunter, which retails for $28 for a half dozen, and the Carbon Stalker Xtreme, which retails for $46. The Carbon Hunter struggled in my test. It only could pull off 1 3/4 stars in the spine category. There was just way too much variance. It did better in the straightness category with 3.5 stars, and it pulled in another 3 stars in the consistency category. Overall, it could only pull off a quality score of 44. So out of the gate, it's not looking too good for the store branded arrows. Moving on to the Carbon Hunter Xtreme, this arrow still struggled a bit in the spine testing with 3.5 stars, but it's certainly an improvement over the Carbon Hunter. In straightness testing, it jumped way up to 4 3/4 stars, which is obviously a really good outcome. Consistency came in for another 4 1/4 stars. So a pretty good showing by Cabelas' higher dollar option, which ended up with a quality score of 76. Certainly short of our benchmark arrows, but they're about half the cost. The X5 Envy, which retails for $35 for a pack of 6, received 3 1/4 stars in the spine category, 4 stars for its straightness, and 3 1/4 stars for consistency. Overall, the X5 Envy leaves the testing with a score of 64. Moving on to the X3 Hunter arrow at $45 per pack, the star ratings were 2.5 for spine and 3 1/4 for both straightness and consistency. So you can see that in my testing, this box of slightly higher dollar arrows actually underperformed against its lower dollar counterpart. On the Sportsman's Warehouse Vital Impact arrow at $37, this arrow received 4 stars in the spine and consistency category and 4 1/4 stars in straightness. This gives the Vital Impact an overall quality score of 76, and it falls just below the Cabelas Stalker Xtreme. The last brand that we're looking at is Scheels, who teamed up with Victory on their store-branded arrows. The Vendetta comes in at $35 for a pack of 6, while the Vendetta Pro is $10 more at $45 a pack. Let's look at the base Vendetta arrow first. The Vendetta put up strong numbers for such an inexpensive arrow. Spine scores generated 4 stars, straightness scores were even better, giving it 4.5 stars. Consistency scores split the difference with 4 1/4 stars. That's a good result, and the Vendetta comes in at an overall quality score of 78. Now let's move on to the Vendetta Pro. Spine numbers move it up to a crazy 4 3/4 stars. Straightness is slightly lower and results in 4 stars. Consistency is the same as the Vendetta at 4 1/4 stars. That gives the Vendetta Pro an overall quality score of 82. That's only 1 point lower than the $88 FMJ and only 40 $45 for a 6-pack. That's really good performance for a relatively inexpensive arrow. Let's go ahead and add those Scheels arrows to the overall graph and look at the final results. What you can see here is that there are good options at more affordable price points. Your purchasing decision should not be made on the affordability of the arrow. You also have to consider your needs for the arrow. The obvious big winners here are Scheels and Victory. The Victory Rip had a surprise upset over the Easton FMJ, and Scheels, who co-branded their arrows with Victory, beat out the competition with high-quality, affordable options. Remember that this is just the beginning. Now that we know the quality of the store-branded arrows, it's time to start bringing the top names in the industry and see what they're producing. We'll look at Gold Tip, Black Eagle, and Carbon Express, as well as digging deeper into the Easton and Victory lines. My goal here is to always provide high quality and unbiased reviews so that you can make the best purchasing decision. And that's exactly what we'll do with these arrow reviews. No brand favorites, just data. As I said earlier, I'm in the works on a new series to help you select, set up, and tune your arrows. So make sure to subscribe if you'd like to see that. Best way to support the channel is by sharing the video. It doesn't matter if you're sending it to a buddy to roast him that he spent too much on arrows, or if it's just good information. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.